Hi, my name is Tanner, and I'm going to be talking about pre-progressive era conservation efforts in the United States. Although not the primary reason for colonizing the Western Hemisphere, many countries wanted extra natural resources. Much of Europe had become decimated after the use of steam power, and for this reason, many new forests were needed. Literary figureheads of the Transcendentalist movement include Walt Whitman, Ralph Waldo Emerson, and Henry David Thoreau.
It's Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Thanks, Jane. Henry David Thoreau wrote a very influential book during this time period called Walden, or Life in the Woods. One quote from it reads, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." In 1827, Birds of America was published by the Audubon Society. This is one of the first scientific movements for conservation. Gold being established at Sutter's Mill in 1848 in California really signified westward expansion. A year later, the Department of Interior was created, and in 1862, the Department of Agriculture and the Homestead Act were both created. This shows an increasing use of Western territory, and the fact that most of the nation's resources now were found in the West. As a response to all this westward expansion, George Perkins Marsh—
It's George Perkins, Tanner.
Thanks, Jane— wrote and published Man and Nature, the Earth as Modified by Human Action. This is the first distinctly scientific defense of nature, as opposed to spiritual as found in the Transcendentalists. It emphasized forest preservation and water conservation. Urban reforms found at this time, including the creation of Central Park by Frederick Law Olmsted, signified how urban dwellers were also increasingly aware of the environmental movement and wanted to be in touch with the natural life. This movement goes along with the realization of capitalism's innate incompatibility with environmentalism, as seen in the trust that was Standard Oil and their exploitation of fossil fuels. In 1872, President Grant signed legislation to make Yellowstone a national park, our first national park. In 1885, the U.S. Biological Survey was created, partly in concern for the decimation of the buffalo population. This was because of the expansion of railroads and industry, along with the invasion into the buffalo's natural habitat. In 1892, the Sierra Club was created under the leadership of John Muir. This was for the purpose of preserving natural landscapes. Towards the conclusion of the 19th century, it was clear that many conservation issues still existed. Because of this, the progressive era reformers would have to turn over a new leaf when trying to change the conservation movement.
I'm Lana, and I'm here to talk about progressive era conservation reforms. As Tanner said, the late 19th century saw a jump in the exploitation of land by private companies. The Progressive Party thought it was their civic duty to step in and curb the depletion of natural resources. Therefore, they supported management of resources by the federal government. Progressive environmental activists branched into two groups: conservationists who believed that land should be saved for future economic opportunities, and preservationists who thought that land should be conserved for its own sake. The first conservation movements focused on water, soil, and forestry management. Theodore Roosevelt.
It's Roosevelt.
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 I said Roosevelt.
It's Roosevelt.
Roosevelt.
Say Rose.
Rose.
Say Velt.
Velt.
Say Roosevelt.
Roosevelt.
No.
Oh. Theodore Roosevelt,
Oh my God.
a member of the Progressive Party, was the first president to focus on conservation. He included in part of his Square Deal plan. He appointed Gifford Pinchot as the federal chief of forestry, and together they passed acts like the Waterways Commission Acts of 1907 and the National Conservation Commission of 1909. As a young man, Teddy Roosevelt realized the need for conservation when he went west on a bison hunting trip. After seeing how sparse the population was due to overhunting, he was prompted to buy a ranch in the Badlands of North Dakota, growing his love of nature. He founded the Boone and Crockett Club for prominent Easterners who enjoyed hunting and spent most of his later life going on exotic big game hunting trips with fellow club members. During his presidency, Roosevelt created 5 national parks, 18 national monuments, 51 bird reserves, and 4 game reserves, protecting 230 million square acres in total. That included the addition of Crater Lake National Park, Wind Cave National Park, Sully's Hill National Park, Platte National Park, and Mesa Verde National Park. Parks were chosen based on natural beauty, unique geological features, unusual ecosystems, and recreational opportunities. He once interrupted a national speaking tour to go camping in Yosemite Valley with John Muir, a prominent preservationist and founder of the Sierra Club. There are currently 59 national parks, totaling over 500 million protected acres under the control of the Department of the Interiors. Historian John Cooper said, "Conservation is the one real cause for Theodore Roosevelt when he first becomes president. It is the only thing in domestic affairs where he gets out in front of the public and even of reformers. He believes that we humans are stewards of the environment, and what we have to do is to take the longer view, not use up the resources, because if we use them up now, they will not be here for our children, and we have to pass this estate on. We have to take a longer view."
After Teddy Roosevelt, improvements in the world of conservation continued. In 1916, the National Park Service Agency was created by Congress, which served to manage, preserve, and maintain the copious amounts of America's national parks, forests, monuments, and other various conservation efforts. As of today, the NPS oversees 59 national parks and 348 other units related to conservation. Similar to the National Park Service's efforts towards conservation was the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC. The CCC was created in 1933 under President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal and was intended to provide work for young men during the Great Depression, while simultaneously preserving and managing the development of the nation's natural resources. Prior to its disbandment in 1944, the CCC was able to accomplish many environmentally beneficial feats, such as the reforestation efforts by Roosevelt's Tree Army, which is believed to have planted over 3 billion trees in less than 10 years, the development of 500 camps directed by the Soil Conservation Service, and the insane amount of time and energy put into a variety of other conservation efforts, such as protecting wildlife habitats, restocking fish populations, and improving the quality of streams. Unfortunately, the CCC was not able to remain a constant force for conservation. It was disbanded after the United States joined World War II, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor had made it more directly affected by the war. Despite the increase in the development of nature that occurred under Eisenhower's administration, there were still efforts at conservation, such as the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which protected the fragile ecosystems in Alaska, a region that would have been easily dismissed were it not for an article by George Collins and Lowell Summer called Northeast Alaska, the Last Great Wilderness. In the 1960s, a period of radical change and reform, Rachel Carson published her book entitled Silent Spring, which exposed to Americans the dangers of pesticides to people and the environment, as well as the importance of preserving the integrity and beauty of the earth. After the increase in environmental awareness, conservation efforts and environmental concern really started picking up under Nixon's presidency, with things like the Environmental Protection Agency, which protects the health and public of the environment, and the National Resources Defense Council, a nonprofit organization that seeks sustainable policies on federal, local, and industrial levels. The increasing importance of the protection and maintenance of the environment was apparent in the 1970s, a decade which saw the celebration of the first Earth Day and the founding of the media-based environmental awareness organization Greenpeace. And now, unfortunately, it's time for the mystery document, and I was chosen to read said mystery document that I am not prepared for. Okay, so the condition for losing the mystery document challenge is that I get to be
Take the pine cones.
drenched in pine cones, since conservation. All across the country, evidence of environmental degradation was appearing everywhere, and everyone noticed except the political establishment. The environmental issue simply was not to be found on the nation's political agenda. The people were concerned, but the politicians were not. Suddenly, the idea occurred to me. Why not organize a huge grassroots protest over what was happening to our environment? Alright, so I don't know who it is. I have no indication of what kind of person this was, except that they were an advocate for conservation and for the environment. So I'm gonna quit and be sad, and then I'm gonna read the answer, and we'll find out who it was. It was Senator Gaylord Nelson, who Catherine mentioned earlier founded the first Earth Day and started that lovely tradition of awareness. Alright, Can I have the goggles, please? And now, to talk about modern environmental movements, I'm going to pass this over to Catherine. In the late 20th century, there was an increasing concern for environment in the public. This prompted the federal government to take action. During President Nixon's administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA, was founded to protect the health of the environment as well as the public. The EPA would be very useful in establishing legislation such as the Clean Air Act in 1970, the Noise Control Act in 1972, the Clean Water Act in 1972, Safe Drinking Water Act, Toxic Substances Control Act, and the Superfund.
Mr. Green, but I thought solar power was a political idea created in the last 10 years. Oh, me from the past. Don't you know at the Exposition Universelle, Augustin Mouchot released his solar power steam engine? Solar power has been an issue for generations.
Other organizations also helped out, such as the creation of the Endangered Species Act to conserve threatened or endangered species and their environments. Much of the legislation passed benefited human health in addition to environmental health, and as the public came to realize that their lives were directly influenced by the environment, many social movements sprung up. The first Earth Day was held on April 22, 1970. 20 million demonstrators all over the country advocated for the protection of the environment. Earth Day became an annual occurrence after the second Earth Day in 1990. The public outcry for conservation flowed into political matters. The League of Conservation Voters is a political organization that works to nationalize environmental values and educate the public. As more and more people came to realize their impact on the environment, efforts were made on both state and federal government levels. Many states took it upon themselves to restore their natural ecosystems, like that of the Everglades in Florida, and the federal government took on larger issues, like the setting up of fuel efficiency standards and efforts to reduce oil consumption and pollution. Advancements in technology and increased knowledge of climate change and global warming have helped conservation efforts, and in the future more progress will hopefully be made. Although many advancements have been made in the area of conservation, will it be enough to stop what we've already put in motion?